On day 19, we'll be focusing on the notions of fable, attachment, and belonging. Fables are symbolic tales. Whether you're a beginner or you're experienced, they may still be, for you, the best way to write. Fables test your ability to be simple and clear, and fable express themselves generally are displayed in the form of cycles. These cycles will structure your story in three types of phases: the phases of discovery, the phases of crisis, and the phases of comfort. You'll make use of these three kinds of phases in every kind of story. Every time your character is facing a new environment, a new character, she discovers something. When she's facing an issue, she goes through a crisis. And after every crisis, she has the ability to restore herself, to rest. Fables are stories. All stories are dependent on contextualization. Context being the combination of a due genre framed in the proper manner in order to express an emotion. These offer predictability, and predictability leads to more attachment. Now, the notion of attachment here in the frame of fables will be expressed through what the character accomplish in the fable for the public. What the character accomplish in the fable for themselves, and what the character accomplish through the fable for you. Attachment here will be studied through this cyclical frame, and this cyclical will help you to reinforce the sense of belonging through the context. Before starting on the concept of cyclical storytelling and fables, a reminder on how to improvise any scene. Every scene, every action is followed by a reaction. So you could consider that the reaction factor is the initiating factor of the scene. It begins. Your scene starts through the reaction of a character, because it is the first interaction. This reaction is meant to be surprising to some degree. This surprise is appreciated through the context you've exposed. So the perspective of a character, the perspective of another character, and then these two perspectives confronted one against the other in a due environment, in a due setting. Once you've created this context, you've created a sense of predictability. Now that we know who are the stakeholders, who are the characters which are in this conflictual situation, we have to determine the stakes. And once you determine the stakes, you know what's the issue. Once you know what's the issue, you know how to potentially solve it. And you know what are the possible outcomes. Predictability leads to attachment because they both draw on the familiarity factor, and this familiarity will create belonging. Familiarity creates a sense of belonging. It is the most important factor you want to draw on when it comes to creating stories. You'll go from predictability to attachment to a full familiarity factor to belonging. Now, get back to the beginning. You want your public to be entertained again. You want to entertain your public because you want them to stay longer. So you have to surprise them again. So you'll draw on familiarity, and then you have to present them something new again, something slightly new, alteration of something you've already presented. By doing so, you preserve this comfort zone, this belonging space, which is yours, which belongs to your characters, and which is the public space. And you are able to tweak the space just enough to provide entertainment in the long run. Now that's how you improvise a scene, any scene. Let's get back to the larger scale. The larger scale you'll encounter is the scale of the whole story, the story herself. So now you have to decide which scale is your story. Do you want to write one book, one story, one film? Do you want to start a saga of which you'll know the end? You're starting now a trilogy, a quadrilogy, a pentalogy. You know that you'll have this definite amount of episodes in your saga. Are you starting a series of which you may not know the end? Independently on the scale of your story, which you are free to determine, all of these will be following this pattern, the largest pattern, the story scale pattern, which is defined by a title, which is your main theme, then the exposition of a first theme, a first core theme, which is a derivation of your main theme, which will be your title. And that's an easy way, really, to choose the title of your book or the title of your movie or of your game. You just take your main theme. For example, if your main theme is courage, if you want to expose to your public and to your character the allegory of courage, you take a symbol which represents courage for you. Maybe it may be fire, for example, maybe heat. Maybe the punch or the sword. You take a symbol which represents courage in your opinion, and you make it the title of your book, of your game, of your movie, so on. Then from this, you derivate one sub-element from this. Again, if it's courage, for example, you may want to use all of them. For example, for your first theme, you may want to use the fire because it's igniting the start of the story. Then you may want to use the punch. The punch is quite a blunt object, quite unrefined. You want to refine it into a sword, for example. And in the end, you may expose the fact that courage, in the end, this fire, its only objective is to bring warmth. So you may let's restart that. Let's suppose we got this example. Let's suppose through this example we're going through the notion of courage. Now, how's courage for you? And how do you want to exemplify it through your story phases? Now we got 4 phases. Your first phase will be the discovery phase. So now in the example where courage is our main theme, the symbol we're using, because we're writing 5, the symbol we're using is the flame, or fire. Let's say it's the flame itself. So courage is a flame. Then you have your crisis, and your character may become a little more aggressive. Your character may become a little rougher because she has to act quickly. She has to find a solution quickly to her problem. Now, courage then can become a punch. Quite blunt, quite unrefined, quite rough. That's it. When the character has gone through the crisis, she's gone through actually 2 of them right now. There's still a 3rd crisis in chapter 9. And your character has honed her skill. Now her punch has refined itself into an axe or into a sword. Now courage is a blade. No, it's not blunt anymore. It's not just a hammer. And in the end, your character realizes that courage is not meant to hurt. Courage is meant to protect. That's the final goal of knowledge, of courage. And now, courage is warm. No. Or if warmth is it's too confusing, if it's too vague for you, you can realize that courage is a half. And again, here, if you're doing poetry, it's really easy to make those two words rhyme with one another. So you can use them alternatively. You know, if you want to be more multidimensional into the exposition of your themes, of the symbolism you're making use of. If you want to make your allegories more versatile. So now we have a classical cycle here, a classical evolution, a classical main character's evolution here. So first, the character starts with the ignition phase, and here the ignition is much, literally translated through the symbol of what ignition is, which is fire or flame. Again, here, if you want to have multiple levels of readability, if you want to appeal to multiple kind of audiences, you can use alternatively fire, because the word fire will speak to a fringe of your public, maybe, or some of your characters, because it's the same thing. You want to create your character to correspond to a certain fringe of your public, to a certain wedge of your public. Whereas flame will speak to another wedge of your character, another shard of your public. Just like the words, ashes or cinders. Because the end of the story may be really different, The end of the story may be the character, goes through these action phases, through these conflictual phases, through this moment of harshness, and in the end, the lesson is different. In the end, the lesson the character gets is not that courage is meant to protect, but courage, if it is misused, if it is used improperly, will be meant to destroy. So in the end, your fire may not be a harm, your flame may not bring warmth. In the end, it may bring ashes, cinders. So, the end of something, a door to nothingness. So that's two possibilities, because again, you want to give yourself choices. You want to give yourself multiple possibility. You want to use this exercise to create versatility in yourself. Because if your main objective, when it comes to the public, when it comes to your character, is creating belonging, you want to create this belonging for yourself, and you may want now to start attaching yourself to your story more than anyone else, because they're your stories. So play with these stories. Give yourself choices. Give yourself possibilities. Make use of the principles in these videos, in this course, because they will give you very simple structures. No, we're trying to give you the simplest structure possible, but at the same time, we had the right amount of complexity for you to have as much choices as you want to have. Because that's the determining factor, freedom. If you can't find freedom in your stories, you will want to return to your story. Now let's get back to this attachment factor and to this belonging factor. If you're writing a fable, if you're writing a cyclical story, if you're writing allegories, symbolism, which genre will you prefer? Which genre and which context are most suited to this story? Now, there is a genre which, in its name, bears fable, bears the meaning of fable, and it would be the saga genre. Now, saga is defined by remembrance, and contemplation, these two are the main emotions you're targeting once you're selecting this genre. If you create a saga, if you create, for example, a trilogy, you want in your first part, in your first book, first movie, first game, to create a feeling of enticement. You want to entice the public to follow the character's journey. But in your second part, you want the public to stay in this journey, to remain in this journey. So it will be different from the first part. And in the last part, you want the public to remember this journey. It's done now. It's finished. You may have demands from your public to continue to write a follow-up to the story, but it might be ill-advised, because it might be boring. For example, you may have your public you may have demands from your public to write what's happening after this story. Do these characters have children, and do these children go through the same kind of adventure? And that's a valid story plot. That's a valid synopsis. But you may not want to do that. You may want to do something different, because you may estimate that it won't work. According to you, it will not work. But now you've created this schema. Now you've created this pattern of enticement, staying, and remembrance. You have to realize that you've done what you had to do, really, because that's the main objective again of this course: creating attachment, creating belonging, creating this will to remember the story you've created and to return to this story. So really, saga here is the go-to genre if you don't know which kind of story to start writing. Now, if you've tested, you're quite advanced now in the process. You're at the half part. You've done 50% of the process right now, and you may already be thinking about your next book, your next movie, your next game, and you may be thinking, I love what I did. I love it, but I want to do something different. I have multiple genres, multiple frames to try. I want to experiment something different. I'm quite satisfied with what I've done now. If you're in the case where you don't know what you're going to do next, and you haven't tried Saga, or you've tried Saga and you loved it and you don't know what to do next, do it again. Do it again. Try to write a sequel to what you've done. Maybe do it with different characters. But try this sequel. Now, Saga originally is the combination of action and adventure. It's an epic to some degree. It might not be as big as all the epics you've been exposed to in book form, in movie form, in game form. But Saga in itself is an action adventure story. You have phases of action, phases of adventure. You have the world's discovery, the journey to the place the character is looking for, the threat, the menace, and the defeat of these two, and then back to the origin of the journey, so the discovery again. So in Saga, you have this cyclical schema, this pattern you'll find in general action adventure. And again, it's really easy to write following the action adventure pattern, because action, you'll keep it for your dialogue phases, your direct interactions, and the adventure state of mind, you'll keep it for the descriptions, the discovery of new environment. So, in a sense, if you want to simplify it, action will serve you to create characters and characters' relationship, and adventure will allow you to create environment and character-environment relationship. So the attachment to the environment. So that's your bread, that's your duff. That's the meat of the story. And from time to time, you may want to add some elements of comedy, some elements of drama, some elements of horror, just to bring some diversity. You have your familiar base, the duff of your story, which is action adventure, which is saga. And then you want to spice it up. You want to put the garniture on. You want to put some meat, some cheese, comedy, horror, drama. You had these ingredients. You had them in certain chapter, certain scenes to create more diversity, more versatility in your story, to give yourself more choice, more freedom, more ability to be flexible, to entertain your public more, but also to entertain yourself. Because every time you want to, let's say you're going for action adventure, but you want to add some comedy because you may realize that your story is getting a little too serious, a little too solemn, and you want to add some versatility. If you're adding comedy now, if you're adding some relief, some joy to your story, it's because you want to entertain yourself first. You want to entertain yourself first. And then, if it works on you, it may work on other people. It may work on your public, certain fringes of your public, certain shards of your public, or maybe your public as a whole, because you made your comedy so universal now that everybody will like it. Fables are stories, and like every story, they revolve around your characters. Characters is the part you don't want to miss. Now, which kind of characters do you need in any story? And which kind of character are crucial to a fable? Now, these kind of characters, the four behavior traits you're seeing right now, they're useful for any story. They're really useful for any story, and it should show you the potential of fable to be the most universal kind of story. Fable are the most universal kind of story, and if you don't know what to start with a fable. It will be much, much easier because that's the kind of story you've been exposed most to. Now, it also means that everything that works in a fable is highly likely to work in another kind of story. Just highly likely. It's not automatic, but it has large chance to work in another story. Now, for the characters, which kind of characters do you need? First, you need an ignition. You need a starter. So you need a passionate character. You want to target the emotions, because you're a character. I'm saying you need passionate character. You need to be passionate. You need to be this character as well. You need to be this passionate character, this enjoyable character, this relatable character, this memorable character. It's you too. Applies to every and each of your main characters, applies to most of your secondary characters, applies to, I suppose, a lot of your tertiary characters, but it's not that important because tertiary characters are not often on screen. In your games, in your movies, they will not often be on screen. But it applies first and foremost to the zeroth character, to the original character. You, the author. So you need to be passionate, and you need to translate this passion through your main characters, mostly. So be targeted, be focused on which emotion you want to produce, you want to display, and then the genre you want to display. Be passionate about the tale. Let your character be passionate about the tale. No, they have a goal. Because, passionate is just that. You're focused on your goal. You're focused on your goal, you think about it often, you may be obsessed by it, if it's a word you want to use. And that's it. And that will cause an enjoyability factor, because if you're focused enough, if you're loyal to your goal, if one of your characters, it's a support character. Support character is supposed to be supportive, supposed to aid the main character. So if your support character which is often a secondary character, but she may be a main character, is obsessed with helping your main character, you will love her more. You will love her more, and your public is likely to love her more. This character will become enjoyable because she is helpful, because she's supportive, because she's just nice to be around. So, just to make a parallel with all we've done before, the enjoyable factor, the enjoyable part, it's the strengths. This part here, it's the strength part of your character creation. This part here, the first part, is the goal. You want to be focused on your goal. Your goal, as an author, as the character, the author character, is to focus on the emotion you want to display, to create attachment. You want to create attachment. The enjoyable part, so it's strength. So, by following our logic, the relatable part will be the weaknesses. Not gonna put it here, because it will be hidden by the character afterwards. Now let's put our avatar here. So the relatable part, it's the weaknesses. Weaknesses are supposed to be here to create relatability. Now, this relatability is possible if the weaknesses are not, they don't make your character appear too malevolent. For example, you don't make your character appear excessively undesirable. No, your character is fallible. Your character can lose. She will lose, in fact. She can fail. But this failure should be expressed, again, through the will to help someone else. Your character wants to help someone else and she fails. That will create more relatability. Your character may have some daunting weaknesses sometimes, some weaknesses that are more difficult to admit, more difficult to hone, more difficult to correct. But again, it depends on the relatability factor you want to establish. Because if your character has unusual weaknesses, weaknesses which are considered to be truly undesirable behavior trait, it may create a different kind of attachment, to your public, to the other characters, and that may help you to create a very unique character. So it may be a great choice as well. Finally, we get to the last part. If you want to create a memorable character, you want to focus on quirks. Now, what are quirks? In previous chapters, we've established that the appearance is a quirk. The appearance of your character, the design of your character, the silhouette of your character, the accessories of your character. All of these are physical quirks. Now you have behavioral quirks also. Catchphrases, quotes, even from your characters, habits from your characters. All of these are mental quirks, psychological quirks. These quirks will allow the public and will allow the other characters, because to identify this character much more easily. And in the end, the quirks are all you're going to remember. You're going to remember this character with the funny hat. You're going to remember this character with the funny habit, with the funny sentences, funny phrase, the way to express herself, her way to move. Maybe more than what she's done in the story, really. So the quirks are really the memorability factor. They're the final factor. They're, in a sense, the core element of the attachment factor. Because you get attached to a character because you enjoy her. You get attached to a character because you relate to her. These two are absolutely essential when it comes to creating the familiarity with the character. But the memories of your character will come from quirks, will come from the appearance, will come from the accessories, will come from the phrases, will come from the habits, will come from the way she has lived. Fables are symbolic tales. More than any other kind of story, they represent the cycle pattern. Now, this cycle is the origin, is the representation of what a fable is. Now, in the core of the cycle, inside it, you will find what the fable is meant to do: create attachment, create familiarity, create a sense of belonging. Now, most stories follow the cycle pattern because you just need to rhythm your story. You need to create enticement, you need to create the will to discover new thing, the will to experiment new thing. You also want, once you've created this hope, this will to find something new, you want to create some form of disappointment, some breaking. And that's what the crisis do. The crisis is meant to ensure that the rest of the character's journey is more valuable, is deeper than just enticement, than just excitement. No, excitement is essential when it comes to starting something. But then your characters and yourself, you'll need more. Once the cycle has been established, you'll present new characters, you'll present multiple characters, you'll present multiple environments. And if you're starting between 4 and 12 characters, between 4 and 12, generally if your story is 100 pages long, between 4 and 6 maximum. If your story is 200 pages long, between 6 and 8. If it's 200 plus, maybe 300 pages, you can go up to 12 characters. And same thing for the environment. Maybe 1 environment, maybe 4 environments, and it may be 10 environments. For the 3 degrees of length. So you want to create attachment to new characters, to new environments, to returning characters, and to returning environments. The likability factor is created by attachment. That's where you start. Then you want to contextualize. You want to reinforce the sense of, really memory. You want to allow people to start creating memories. You want to allow them to start creating memories. The familiarity factor here will make the public and will make the character want to stay in your story, want to remain in your story. Familiarity is also the step where the characters, where the public start to enjoy the story. Because until then, it's only been new possibilities, new hopes, deception, disappointment, pain. At this point, your character realizes that they'll struggle. They'll have to be harmed, There will be some pain on the way. But that's it. That's the contract, That's what they signed for. They want to feel some of it. Because they know that there's a trade-off. Then, finally, once we've established these 3 concepts, cycle, attachment, familiarity, you want to go through the last phase. The goal of this course, really. Creating belonging. Now, belonging is created through the sense of remembrance. And remembrance is a feeling you'll find in Saga, but it's just that Saga is built around remembrance. It's built around contemplation, but it's not exclusive. You'll find remembrance in horror. You'll find remembrance in comedy. You'll find action. You'll find adventure and drama. But in all these 5 other genres, most of the time it will be more in the short term. No, it will be a short-term form of remembrance. Whereas Saga has accumulated, has allowed you the writer, you the author, you the game designer, and also you the reader to some extent, because you'll want to go through your work. You if you want now, let's suppose you're a little early in the process and you've almost finished your story. You may want to read it already and realize that if you want to read your own story multiple times, maybe it makes it's really an enticing story, maybe an extremely enticing story. A story that you want to read is a story that others are likely to want to read. So you may be already developing this remembrance factor for the long term, and the attachment which is linked to it. And Saga really is the genre which will allow you to develop this emotion most, because Saga is simply, most of the time, longer than any other else. And emotional attachment just takes time. That's the simple formula here. Emotional attachment takes time. You see characters multiple times, you'll see environments multiple times, you'll explore environments multiple times, you interact with characters multiple times, and that's really all it takes. Habits, forming a sense of repetition, forming this desire for re-experimenting the same emotions, the same sensations multiple times. And that's why a cycle is the best way to start writing, because you habit yourself to write in this pattern, to write in this manner. You want to write in cycles because it just helps you to create habits, to create familiarity, to create the time you need, the resources you need to develop emotional attachment. And in the end, even if you haven't tried to create belonging actively, it will just gradually appear.